Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Ira Wolfe. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting, the Life Unscripted. I'm so grateful to have you here today. You're known as the world's first Chief Googlization Officer. Very interesting. But today we're going to talk about why are 70% of the people quitting their jobs. Most of the audience listening in to Savvy are business owners, and they'd love to hold on to that awesome talent. But you have your ear to the ground on why there's such a mass quitting of jobs. Before we go to that, just share a little bit about your background.
Thanks very much for having me here and for the opportunity. Yeah, it's crazy times, isn't it?
Tell me.
Call them the never normal times. So I know people want to go back to this normal, but I call it the never normal times. And certainly the Great Resignation is part of that. But before we get there, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, as you mentioned, since 1995. I started this business. And have lived through my first book and the first concept I had was the perfect labor storm. So for people like myself who've been researching this, this isn't any big surprise. It's been coming. McKinsey talked about the talent wars. A lot of other people talked about labor shortages, and here we are in 2022 already. And it's really it's a different time, but not totally unpredictable.
So tell me, now we know the COVID thing happened. Now you said it's been predicted that this was going to happen, the Great Resignation. Was this just like the perfect storm to allow that to come forth, or so how was it predicted?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I called it the perfect labor storm. And for those who were around in the late 90s, it was these three storms that converged, and individually they were just regular weather systems coming through, but they all hit at the same time and created these huge tidal waves. Though rolling it back, if a couple things that people aren't aware of, they blame it on the pandemic, they blame it on millennials, they blame it on Gen Z. There's always a reason, and they all contributed. I don't want to say Gen Z and millennials contributed to that, but certainly the pandemic accelerated that. And it certainly disrupted things, but it sort of just pulled the curtain back. It's that wizard that was behind the curtain, and it said, hey, it's like stuff we throw in the closet because we don't want anybody else to see it. Then one day it leaks or it erupts or it blows up or whatever happens. But if we go back to 1950, and I'm just going to spend about 10 seconds there. But if we go back to 1950, there was one out of every three working age women was in the workforce. And then by 2019, right before the pandemic, there was 60% of women. So it almost doubled over that time. But what happened at the same time, and everybody says, is what happened to all the workers? Well, here's what's happened to all the workers. In 1950, 82%, 4 out of 5 men, working age men, actually had a job. In 2019, it was only 62%.
Where do the other men go? What do they do?
Good question. There's a variety of reasons. I mean, a lot of males are incarcerated, unfortunately. That's a big business. There's a lot of people that are, sadly addicted to opioids. Also men, a lot of those jobs that were in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s were manual labor. And, men still don't go to school. The rate, that's another important factor. The education rate in the 1950s, 5% of women went to college, and almost all men, out of classes, it was 75% men made up college students. It's now 60% of women are in college, and only 40% of men get a college degree or some type of post-secondary degree. The problem is most jobs require some type of, not necessarily a 4-year degree, but some type of post-high school, post-secondary degree. And men have traditionally not pursued that that number over the last 70 years. So we have less people participating. Going back to your question, why aren't men working?
Yeah.
One is a lot of them aren't qualified to do the jobs that are required now. Nursing, nursing jobs are abundant. It's still 90 some percent female.
That's interesting. Something you mentioned, Ira, because in the 50s, you said a lot of manual labor. A lot of things have shifted to machines doing the work. And so I'm guessing what could be done by manual labor in the 50s are now being accomplished by computers or machines. I wonder.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. And that's really not true. I mean, down the road, so, decades or down the road, it may be the case. There are certainly people who have been misplaced or displaced because of robots and automation. But if you look at I know this is a scary picture. You look at inside an Amazon distribution center, and there's all these machines running back and forth. There are still people in there, but there are people that have to build the machines, maintain the machines, program the machines. That requires an advanced education. Doesn't mean you have to have a master's and a PhD, but you have to understand coding, and you can basically, you need a high school degree and you can be a coder. But that's not the jobs that men traditionally have pursued, nor women, actually, because computer program and computer sciences has traditionally been more male. Now it's becoming more female. But all these things are all reasons that have disrupted the workforce. And then if you come to modern times, especially over the last 2 years, what the pandemic did was exposed a lot of vulnerabilities. So it brought this to a head. And then when we've been tracking it for the last 20, 25 years, we anticipate this. We knew this was going to happen at some point. We didn't know it was going to happen in 2021. We didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, but we know that over this decade it would happen. But what it did was it exposed the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses and the inefficiencies of education, not training the right people for the right jobs. We also exposed the problem with, again, the infrastructure became the big word, but things like childcare. So going back even to where did the workforce go? In the end of 2019, 60% of women were participating in the workforce. That dropped, is now 56%. That's 4%. That's a lot of people. That's millions of people that are not going into the workforce because they can't get childcare.
Wow.
And it's expensive. And then childcare workers were mostly women, and they've dropped out, and nurses have dropped out, because of burnout and stress, and also baby boomers retired. There's baby boomers continue to work well past when they were supposed to, but now baby boomers said, hey, I've had enough with all this stuff. And baby boomers are older, so they were higher risk people to work in COVID. Immigration, we've had almost zero immigration, 3 million jobs that are open currently for frontline workers. 2 million of them used to be filled by immigration workers. We don't have immigration, so those jobs are open.
Well, that's interesting.
There's a whole host. Yes. When we talk about a perfect labor storm.
It's interesting because a lot of the business owners I talk to that have gotten started, more and more of them are Gen Z and millennials. And part of the reason they left the workforce is they're like, I don't want to be tied to a job. See, when I left high school, and I'm what do you call it? Not Gen Z, Gen X. Yeah.
Gen X. Okay.
And I remember when I left high school, my mom's like, okay, she's a baby boomer. She's like, yeah, you leave high school. She didn't believe in college. You're not going to do something special like be a doctor or a lawyer. So you're going to go and get a job. You're going to stay there till like 60, 65. Then you get to have fun. I'm like, what? I don't like that. I don't like that deal, dude. And I'm hearing from more and more business owners that are getting started. They're like, we don't want to be tied into a job that just keeps us kind of tied to a desk for the next 60 years. And I'm hearing that dissatisfaction. I think what COVID did also is show people that, hey, even if I do take a job, I can take a couple of side hustles, and I can choose how I structure my day and my time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The number, and again, there's a couple different surveys, but consistently, if it's not number one, it's number two of priorities that people want is flexibility. And again, going back to why there's so much turnover, so much resignation going on. Companies are pretty rigid They had policies in place, and this is what we need. And we need people to show up between 9 and 5. And then all of a sudden you found out, right before the pandemic, there was only 2% of executives. And I think this was a conference board survey. So it was a very valid survey. There was only 2% of executives said that their workplace could be remote or hybrid. They said it couldn't work. And then overnight, literally just overnight, is like, okay, yeah, you can go home, but we're going to bring you back. And then you go, this is working out pretty good. That things are getting done and we're saving money and we don't have to have all this real estate and we're able to hire people from anywhere in the world. This is working. And it immediately went from 2% said, yes, we can go 100% remote, to 20% said, yeah, we can be 100% remote. That's a huge number because it just wasn't working. So all these things are going on, but companies haven't figured out how to manage that yet. They're still trying to figure that out, which means as a worker, hey, I'm going in and you're telling me I can do this, but you're not giving me the resources. The managers don't know how to work. You're talking about engagement. We want you to come back for one day. Oh, no, you can't come back because now we're basically on lockdown again. There's too much risk, or we went in and half the people are sick, or some people say, I'm not going back in there. I've got my kids are sick, or my spouse is sick, or I'm not going to take that risk. Or why do I have to commute 2 hours to go to work to go in, and half the people are still on Zoom when I'm in the meeting, when I'm at work and I've taken the time to be there and nobody else has. So all these things are going on, and it just showed that it's going to be evolving for a while. So people want that flexibility.
Yeah. Share your perspective, because I work with a lot of businesses, and the one thing I'm getting is a lot of my friends who own businesses are like, okay, everything's getting back to normal. People are getting their boosters or their flu shots, come back. And I'm like, but they've been home for 2 years and you've been doing business. In fact, actually, some of my friends have actually grown exponentially, which was a shock to them, but they actually did better working remotely. And not everyone can do this. But, I find it interesting. What is your take on why businesses are so like, okay, let's go back to the way it was, instead of going, okay, this is a new opportunity for us to grow and explode in a new way?
So one of the things is that we are living on this exponential curve. So things are just accelerating faster. And I literally just working on this project. That's what I was doing right before we had this conversation. And we used to live in a time where there was a past. We remembered what the past was. We lived in the present, and the present, the normal, whatever that is, the present could be 2 or 3 decades. We went into a routine. Now I know everybody got bored last year and said it was Blur's Day. One day looked after the other. Well, that's what life used to be, is that you graduated, as you said, maybe you went to school, maybe you didn't, you got a job, and every day from 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever it was, you got up, you went to work, you had your weekends, you did that. That was the routine. Things changed so quickly that we've moved from where we used to experience time in the past, present, and future. It now is the past, and it's an evolving future. We don't have a present anymore because every single day changes. And that's just not going to say, well, once the pandemic's over, once everybody gets vaccinated or everybody gets infected and then has herd immunity, whatever you believe in, whatever it's going to happen. That's not the only thing that's changing. Technology is changing, skills are changing, our climate's changing, our mobility is changing, our connectivity is changing. Our demographics are changing. Boomers aren't in control anymore. There's the majority of people that are working are millennials, which are now in their 40s, and Gen Z. So the culture, the mindsets, the stereotypes, what people want, boomers can't say, well, if you want a job, you have to show up here and wait 2 weeks to get paid. And Gen Z and millennials say, I want some flexibility. I'm willing to come to work, but yeah, if I come in at 10 o'clock, that's okay because we don't get anything done anywhere before 10. And I'd like to get my pay on the same day. So 1 day pay, I want demand pay, and I want it in cryptocurrency too.
Wow.
I want Bitcoin.
There's something for me to think about here, because I recall getting a contract from someone that said, hey, we want to work with you. And I knew their history because I'd worked with them as a financial consultant, and I knew they didn't pay their vendors on time. So I said, cool, but you got to pay me ahead of time at the end of each week. And if you don't pay me, then I don't work again going forward. And they were like, I don't know. And they actually did it, but, reluctantly.
Well, one of the movements is called demand pay. And because people had to do all these gigs, you talked about side hustles, is why can't you get paid the day I put 8 hours in? Why can't I go home? It's all done electronically. I mean,
yeah, numbers and
not,
ones.
except for the companies that are still in the Stone Ages. And we just ran it. It was actually, this is curious of also why companies are struggling to hire people or keep people. I was on a call the other day, and there was somebody complaining about how young people just need to learn life skills. And one of those life skills was young people don't know how to cash a check. I gave a check to my employee, and she says, what do I do with this?
Oh my God.
And it's like, okay, I get that part that they don't know how to do it, but that's not a life skill that I've got grandchildren. I'm not teaching them how to deposit a paper check.
Yeah.
It can be done electronically. And if it is, just pull out your phone and scan it in.
Yeah.
And the person that was on the call said, well, I don't trust that. I wouldn't trust doing a remote check deposit.
Well, it works very well, by the way. Anyone thinking it doesn't, it actually is phenomenal.
I do it all the time. I have it. In fact, I talked to my branch manager, not my branch manager, but the branch manager at my bank the other day. There was a problem with something, and she says, I haven't seen you in ages. And I go, I'm not sure I was in your bank in over 2 years, because we went to remote check. I only live, by the way, 2 blocks from the bank, so I can go for a walk. So it was very easy. No need to do it anymore. So
well, the banks near here where I was living were actually closed. There's no one in there.
Right. There wasn't anybody there. And that's why we went to that. But now there's no reason to go back to that. It's easy. I just did that this morning, went to the post office, picked up a check. And yet 3/4 of all the checks we have now are auto deposited. So even the businesses are doing that. But then somehow payroll is still
it's
written
hard.
by hand. If you want to do it that way, that's fine. But good luck attracting a young population. Or actually, and for me, if somebody wanted to write me a check and said you have to wait 2 weeks to get that, I'm not saying that everybody that weekly or biweekly pay is going away. That's good. That may take some time, but I go in and I just say, hey, I just click a button, approve time cards, and the money is moved electronically. I haven't written a check in I don't know how long.
Exactly. And, it's a by case basis. This was several years ago. And what it was is I knew the history on this company. They had asked me to come in. So knowing the history, I said, I don't want to be one of those vendors that aren't getting paid on time. So I worked into the contract. This is how it's going to go. So it protected me.
Well, I'm caught up with you.
Yeah.
So for a lot of things. Yeah. But now people are used to working on Fiverr and Uber and DoorDash, and they get paid, immediately. And so going back to, what employers are having trouble finding people. One is there's a lot of bodies, there's a lot of people. Our population is large, but the population has also gotten much older. So baby boomers are now well beyond their ability to do some of these jobs, especially if they were manual labor. A lot of the young people choose not to go into those professions. There's been a shift between men and women. We've lost immigration, and basically life priorities have changed. People want flexibility, and especially when there can be flexibility, it's still hard in healthcare. Sometimes you have to.
Depends on the actual business.
But even that's changing a bit. There's a lot of monitoring that can be done remotely, and we learned that telehealth really changed, and there's a lot of things that we still don't have to go there, and it can be done remote. But there's some procedures, and obviously there's some things that have to be done, on site, and there's other jobs like that. But companies have not responded. Life just moved much faster than a lot of these companies were able to adapt. And it just revealed how bad the infrastructure was. We live in human resources. Human resources infrastructure is horrible. Software was built for the 90s.
Yeah. Well, we could go on for a long time, but we do have to call it to an end, Ira. But please let everyone know where they can find out more about you, connect with you. How can they do that?
Pretty easy. I mean, as a Googlization guy, you just go to Google and search my name, Ira Wolfe. But you can also go to my website, Success Performance Solutions, or you can go to my or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, and it's a great place, and I'll be happy to welcome the invitations. Also have a newsletter there. It's actually called Never Normal News.
Awesome. Well, it's been a great pleasure meeting you, and I hope this gives food for thought for all business owners to expand their thinking along the lines of letting their talent have more flexibility so they can come to the table and give them the best possible services on their side. So thank you so much, Ira. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for coming to Savvy Broadcasting.
Thanks very much.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.